Well, good afternoon, everyone. I want to start out by thanking Speaker Christine Quinn, City Controller John Liu, and Councilman Eric Ulrich, and also Mary Sims and other representatives of FEMA for joining us today at Queens PS 207 here in Howard Beach. Last week, Schools Chancellor Dennis Walcott and the Department of Education did an outstanding job of getting students back to school. It was no easy task. Before classes could resume, school custodians and engineers had to get buildings cleaned and ready, and the Department of Education had to make arrangements for some 26,000 students and their teachers to resume classes at facilities because their buildings they normally used were damaged by the storm. Just to put 26,000 in perspective, I don't think I bet you there aren't more than 50 cities in the whole country that have that many students. So it's an enormous number of students, but Dennis and all the staff at DOE did an amazing job. Some things people are inconvenienced, but at least we found a classroom seat for all of the students. Bus routes had to be changed. Emergency shelters had to be moved out of school buildings. And I want to thank our teachers, parents, principals, and school staff for their patience and understanding during this difficult time. We're committed to doing everything we can to get public school buildings damaged by Sandy reopened as soon as possible and also make urgent hurricane-related repairs to public hospitals. And that's why tomorrow our administration will ask the City Council to increase the city's capital budget appropriation for the current fiscal year by $500 million. $200 million of that will go to pay for repairs at public schools like this one, damaged by Sandy. The balance of $300 million will pay for repairs to public hospitals. Now, to our knowledge, New York City government has never before made such an emergency provision for additional capital spending because of a natural disaster, and certainly never one of this size. But our city, I think it's fair to say, has experienced a storm as destructive as Sandy was, and we've never done that before. The total cost of replacing and repairing all the damage Sandy did to the city's infrastructure may well run into the billions of dollars. We won't know the full cost for some time, but we're taking this step now because our public schools and public hospitals have immediate needs, and we want to begin the work immediately. We're also moving ahead on making storm-related repairs at other city facilities, but that work does not require the same City Council approval at this time. Financing and then making these repairs really is a key step in our recovery from Sandy, and this capital appropriation would come on top of the $134 million in emergency operating funds city agencies have needed because of Sandy. Funding that worked with the city controller, we worked with the city controller to get us approval for. And John, thank you very much, wherever you are. There you are. And let me add that nearly 20,000 city employees and city-funded contractors were at work on this Sunday alone yesterday, helping our city recover from Hurricane Sandy. We're not stopping. We're 24/7. If we can possibly get everybody to work that much, I think 12 by 7 is about as much as you can hope for. But I've never seen a city come together. I've never seen every agency. It's hard to find any city agency that isn't participating in helping get us back going. The school building that we're at today is one that Sandy's storm surge hit very hard. Currently, repair crews are pumping fuel oil out of the school's basement. You can smell it in the air. And when that's done, they'll decide what further repairs are required. It's likely the building's electrical wiring will have to be substantially or completely replaced. In the meantime, the students who normally attend class here have been relocated to other school buildings in Queens. School buildings like this one in southeast Queens, on Staten Island, and in South Brooklyn that sustained serious damage from Sandy will be covered by this emergency capital appropriation. 23 of them remain closed, and while others received repairs that permitted them to safely reopen, they still need more work. Sandy also did extensive damage at 3 public hospital campuses, Bellevue Hospital Center, Coney Island Hospital, and the Kohler Goldwater Specialty Hospital and Nursing Facility on Roosevelt Island. At these hospitals, we need to repair or replace boiler systems, backup generators, elevators and ventilation, air conditioning, and electrical systems, and we also have to repair areas that were damaged by floodwaters. Sandy did lesser but still serious damage at other public hospitals, including Harlem and Metropolitan Hospital Centers. And these are hospitals that hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers rely on for their medical care every day. Some have nowhere else to go where they can receive such outstanding care. So the repairs that we need to make in our public hospitals just cannot wait. We're hopeful that the federal government will pay the costs of such Sandy-related remediation, either by reimbursing New York City government or by paying for it directly, but we aren't waiting for federal aid before taking action. We owe it to the parents and school children and everyone in need of medical care to reopen schools and hospitals as quickly as possible, and that's what this $500 million emergency appropriation will allow us to do. As you know, New York City has never been one to sit back and wait for the funding. When we see something that absolutely has to be done, we do it, and then we figure out afterwards how to pay for it. It's just the difference between us, I think, and everybody else. We do things, we get them done, we understand we're in this together, and we're not going to wait for anybody. Hopefully they will come through, but regardless, we still have to make sure that every child gets a good education and that everybody, when they need emergency care, can get it. The schools and hospitals damaged by the storm are vital to their communities, and regardless of the level of federal reimbursement they may qualify, they're going to get the aid they need from our administration. New York has always stood by the neighbors in the toughest of times, especially the young, the sick, and the poor, and today that commitment is stronger than ever. Let me, while we're here, also briefly update you to the other progress that we made in recovering from Hurricane Sandy. At this point, we've turned the lights back on at 94% of the more than 400 buildings and public housing developments that lost power after Sandy. Some of the remaining 23 buildings should get their power back today. We've also restored heat and hot water to more than three-quarters of the 386 public housing buildings that lost those services after Sandy, and hundreds of skilled workers from the Housing Authority and from private contractors are expecting to restore heat and hot water to all but a handful of the remaining such buildings by midweek, the rest to follow after that. I've been to see some of these. I've talked to the people. There's extensive damage. This is a major project. We have the best workers that you could possibly find across the country. They know what they're doing. They're working as hard as they can. I'd love to get it done quicker, but we have to do it safely, and we have to do it so that the repairs stand. And we're doing that, and we're not going to stop until we get everything done. For most owners of private homes or businesses still without power, the biggest issue now is that their property can't be re-electrified until a licensed electrician certifies that it's safe to turn the power back on, or until necessary repairs are made so that it can happen. And to expedite that work and the process of making other hurricane-related repairs, we've created something we talked about on Friday called NYC Rapid Repairs. And we're bringing in contractors who will be given responsibility for an area hard hit by Sandy. They'll make repairs for anyone who wants to take part in the program. Remember, one critical piece of information you need is an ID number from FEMA. You do that by registering at disasterassistance.gov, or you can call FEMA at 1-800-621-3362. That's 1-800-621-3362. Beginning tomorrow, you'll also be able to go to one of our restoration centers to get a FEMA ID and sign up for NYC Rapid Repairs. And you can find out all those locations at nyc.gov or by calling 311. Once you're signed up, a contractor will come to your home or business, assess the damage, create a work order, and within a short time the work will be done. It's too early to estimate how long it's going to take. We're still trying to get good numbers, but we think there's something between 30 and 40,000 different customers that need work before you can turn on the power. Last time we checked with Con Ed, they were down to a few thousand places where they could turn it on without getting somebody into each building and fix it. And LIPA is something behind that. But we'll see as we get going. Our priorities are going to be big buildings with lots of people living in them first, and then green stickered buildings because they're probably in better shape and we can get going with them faster, and then we'll work our ways down the list. What we're going to try to do is to get a neighborhood and go through the entire neighborhood at one time if we can possibly do it. But we've got to find a ways to make this process work seamlessly and work quickly. If everybody depends on their own electrician, this would take a very, very long time. We all know that all these contractors are busy. So what we're trying to do is to circumvent that progress and pull everybody together. And we're going to have more on this tomorrow, is exactly how it's going to work. Today we're also announcing the City Department of Buildings will waive all application and permit fees for repair work to buildings damaged by Hurricane Sandy, including for electrical and plumbing work. go to the Department of Buildings webpage at nyc.gov for more details. In the meantime, we're also continuing to provide help to the New Yorkers who need it the most. We estimate that to date, volunteers from NYC Service, members of the National Guard, and the staffs of the Salvation Army have provided some 2 million prepared meals, more than 577,000 bottles of water, more than 155,000 blankets and other critical supplies from the distribution sites that we've set up in the hard-hit areas. Volunteers going door to door have reached more than 20,000 people, offering them food and water and help with cleaning up flood damage in their homes. And I did want to thank the more than 10,000 donors who supported the urgent relief effort by making cash donations to the Mayor's Fund to Advance New York. Even more donations are needed. Go to nyc.gov or 311 to find out how to make a contribution. Before taking questions, I also wanted to remind everyone wishing to donate clothing to please do so through the Salvation Army, Goodwill, Catholic Charities, or other organizations that accept such donations. Unfortunately, many people have been leaving clothes in bags on the streets and in parks and areas hard hit by Sandy. We appreciate the thought, but neither volunteers nor city workers on the spot have the time to check the capacity to pick them up. So please take the extra step yourself of taking the clothes to one of the nonprofit groups I just mentioned. They'll see that the clothing you want to contribute gets to people who needs it. That's what they do well, and the city's just got other things we've got to work on. So if we can split the efforts, we'll get more done for everyone. On that note, let me turn the floor over to Speaker Christine Quinn. Chris?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I just want to recognize my colleague, Councilmember Eric Ulrich, who is with us, and congratulate him. Right after Sandy, he and his wife had a beautiful baby girl. Yeah. So one nice thing that's come along recently. And I just want to, if I can, take a moment just to thank Eric. It's a much longer list than I have time for now, but Eric has been on the ground since before the storm, every second of the storm, representing his district in a way that is the definition of a public servant and really out there literally saving people's lives and helping people get reestablished. So, Eric, I just want to thank you so much and say how proud we all are of you. So thank you. And we in the council tomorrow will move forward with allocating, at the mayor's request, $500 million additional to the capital budget to make sure that the great institutions of our Health and Hospitals Corporation are up and running as quickly as possible, and that the schools in the city of New York, which have been damaged, some which have yet to open, like this school, can open as quickly as possible. It's critically important that people who are uninsured or underinsured always have a place to go in this city. And we know that this storm has caused additional health concerns for people, certainly caused additional stress and mental health concerns for people. And if they can't go to their HHC, particularly ones in Zone A, they might not have anywhere else to go. So this is money that is incredibly important and needs to get in the budget quickly, and that's why it'll happen tomorrow. The part of the funds that will go for public schools are also incredibly important. Think about it. If you're a child who lost your home, what's your second home when you're a child? Your school. So if we can spend and reallocate taxpayer money quickly to get the schools reopened, we'll give children an additional sense of stability, a little normalcy back in their lives. And on the first day of school last week, I was down at a school on the Lower East Side, and a little boy was so excited to get to school, he literally ran into the fence. He couldn't wait to open the gate. He was so excited to get to be back to his friends. And in that school, the custodian on Houston Street at PS 188, I believe is the number, he slept in that school from Sunday to Wednesday, bagging and taping and caulking to keep his school safe as the water rose to 4 feet. So the least we can do in government is reallocate these funds to make sure the structural needs are done. And I just want to thank President Aviles, Chancellor Walcott, and Mayor Bloomberg for making this request to the council, and we will make sure it happens quickly tomorrow. And thank you, Comptroller Liu, for making sure the contracts and the money flow out there quickly.
John, you want to?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Superstorm Sandy ripped the roofs up above the heads of our fellow New Yorkers. It also ripped a hole in our hearts by taking the lives of 43 fellow New Yorkers. That kind of loss could never be recovered or made up in any way. This plan is a necessary plan that will get schools and hospitals up running again. It will help return to as close to normalcy as possible the lives of thousands of New Yorkers across the city, here in southern Queens, in southern Brooklyn, and also in much of Staten Island. And this is a plan that my office will continue to support. I believe that the city's financial position is strong and solid enough to withstand this additional need. But nonetheless, we will also work hard to maximize the reimbursements that we are due from the federal government as quickly as possible. Speaking with a dozen or so students here at PS 207 just outside, they had all concurred without any glares from their parents that they want to get back to school as quickly as possible. And it is our responsibility to make sure that that happens as quickly as possible. So, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for putting this $500 million capital plan together. We'll get out there and issue the bonds as quickly as possible so that we can go ahead with these repairs without any delay whatsoever. Thank you.
John, thank you. And I'm going after this to leave two flowers that we took this morning from the very moving service up in Washington Heights, the memory of the people that died in Flight 587. The memorial is out here in the Rockaways, but because there was so much damage around it, everybody thought it would be easier this year to have it in the ceremony in a church in Washington Heights. But I took two flowers, and I'm going to put them out there to represent all of the people who've lost loved ones, and want to make sure that those looking down will see the flowers and understand we have not forgotten them. Before taking questions, let me summarize today's announcement for our Spanish-speaking New Yorkers. Le hemos pedido al Consejo Municipal que aprueban $500 millones para reparaciones urgentes a las escuelas públicas y los hospitales públicos dañados por el huracán Sandy. And with that, I'll be happy to take some questions. Please identify who you are for the people in the room. Yes, sir, Miss.
Erin Durkin, Daily News. Mayor, does the city have any kind of plan B on how to pay for this should the FEMA reimbursements not come through in full?
Well, the FEMA's already said that they've committed to come through. I think there'll be probably arguments about how much and how quickly and the normal bureaucratic stuff. But you can't fault FEMA. They've been there since day one, people on the ground. And my recollection is last time I talked to Craig Fugate, which was maybe 4 or 5 days ago, they'd already given out something like $85 million. Yes, Miss.
Jen Pelt from the Associated Press. Turning to the subject of evacuations, have you thought at all about, after this experience, whether there's anything more or different the government can and should?
You know, the alternative, number one, you have to be very careful. I think the answer to your question is don't cry wolf. So some people criticized us for not evacuating everybody in Zone A when the snowstorm of last week came in. But the forecast was for something that was not going to be damaging, have normal flooding in the low-lying areas, and winds that were similar to what we have in many northeasters. And so we didn't do that because had we done that, the next time you don't have the credibility. You can't, the first thing to answer your question is don't do it very often unless you really have a good forecast. And let us pray that when you do it, it turns out you're wrong and you don't get the storm, although that does ruin your credibility for the next time. The second thing is there's just a limited number of ways you can get out people. We made robocalls. We had police cars going down the street with loudspeakers. We tried to get as much publicity through the news media as we could. We had a manual, text messaging, all of the social media, which lets you get to more people. I don't know what percentage didn't get the message, but I can tell you that most of the people I talked to that did not evacuate did say they got the message, but they just didn't believe it, and they wanted to stay with their house. And you got to remember that these people are people who, in many cases, have built the house themselves or certainly renovated it themselves. They're very proud of it. This is the great American dream, to get a house by the beach. And unfortunately, houses by the beach are always going to be subject to storm damage. That's been happening around the world ever since people built houses. And so I don't know that if you had a mandatory evacuation order and you sent the police out to pull people out of their houses, I'm not sure. Number one, you couldn't possibly have gotten to everybody, and I'm not sure that that's the right alternative. I think we just have to understand people have got to start learning that when we say something, we mean it. It's based on the best prognostication, the best science, and let's hope that we do it in error, but we're not going to overdo it. and maybe there's not any other solution to that. Yes, sir.
Hi, Ilya Maritz from WNYC. Do you have any idea how much the storm may impact city revenues for the budget?
No, it's much too early. Yeah, you know, a lot of the stores, small stores, are out of business for a while. Hopefully they'll come back. They don't generate that much. The big businesses generate an awful lot, and most landlords will continue to pay property taxes. There are some companies that can't get into their buildings, but it's not going to have a big effect in terms of the revenue side. What's different here is our expenses have gone up dramatically, and it's much too early to tell how much. Sir, you had a question?
Mr. Mayor, Dave Seisman, New York Post. New Jersey's getting rid of the gas restrictions tomorrow. Is there a timeline when the city might get rid of it?
We'll see. I think it's hard to measure, but it looks like there are a handful more gas stations open than there were yesterday and the day before. Anecdotal evidence is that lines are shorter, and hopefully that's true. It's also true that if people think the lines are shorter, then they're going to behave differently. They're not going to try to fill up when they're down only a quarter of a tank. And so it's one of these self-correcting things. And with time, the distribution facilities that haven't been functioning will come back online. So for the moment, we're going to leave these in. Be interesting to see what happens in New Jersey, but you can never get good numbers anyways. So it's all going to be anecdotal. I see no harm in leaving it in for a while. If it doesn't, if we could have taken it out, it's not that much of an inconvenience. People have gotten used to it already. Let's ride with it. Last question, Miss.
Grace Rao from New York One. This is actually for Alan Aviles about the hospitals. Two questions. I'm wondering, the hospitals that are closed, is there an opening date for any of them that you can share with us? And also, the mayor talked about some of the structural damage to the buildings, needing new boilers, et cetera. But were there any medical documents that were lost in the floods or lab results that were affected somehow by the storm?
Well, to answer the second question first, we do use electronic medical records, so all of that data is stored on servers remotely and is backed up by a second set of servers in 2 different data centers. So none of that important information was lost. It all is recoverable. On the first question, we are going to have to bring up essential services at Coney Island and at Bellevue in phases. Coney Island is already providing outpatient services and has been doing that since 3 days after the storm. They're running those services 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Bellevue will initiate its outpatient services again a week from today on Monday, November 19th. They also will run those 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The emergency departments are more complicated to bring up. We are working on bringing them up both at Coney and at Bellevue by the end of this month. However, particularly at Bellevue, we will need state approval to bring up an emergency department that will run solely on emergency generator power for a period of time. We will ensure we have backup to that emergency generator power, and we expect we will get approval, but that will be necessary for us to bring partial emergency services online. Full service for both of these hospitals, including their critical care units, their operating rooms, their inpatient units for Coney Island. We believe we can do that by the first week of January. For Bellevue, it is likely to be the first week of February.
We're going to take last one.
Ms. Gonzalez, Telemundo. The plan to raise school lunch prices and parking fees. I spoke to some city council members from the Bronx and Washington Heights who say you can't keep balancing the budget on the backs of working New Yorkers.
Well, working New Yorkers are the ones that pay our taxes, and we're going to have to balance the budget. We're all going to have to kick in on this. It's easy to say I don't like A, B, and C. We'll come up with what things would they like to have us raise taxes. The issue here is we're trying to find some balance so that everybody shares a little bit in the pain, everybody contributes, we're all in this together, and do it such that people can afford. It's not asking a lot to go in this day and age from one price to another if it's a relatively small price, but if the large number of people do it, it contributes significant revenues. We have a budget that is going to be strained by the recovery. We have a budget that is questionable because of some people suing us for their own selfish reasons to stop the taxi medallions. We have great uncertainties out there, and we will balance our budget like we've done every single year responsibly. We have cut $1.5 billion out of our expenses. This is like the 9th program to eliminate the gap, I think, since we've come into office. The sad thing is people want more services, and we've got to grow our economy if our tax base is going to grow. And while it is doing better than the rest of the country, we are still in a national recession that is not doing all that well. I don't know if technically it meets the definition of a natural recession, and New York is doing better than most other places. But we don't certainly have the boom that we would like to have to help us balance the budget without raising fees, without looking for things that we can do without. We've got to decide what things are necessary and what things are just things that are nice to have. We cannot afford just the nice things, or at least all of the nice things. The things that we have to have come first, and we're not going to cut those services. Those are the services that people depend on. They keep us safe. They educate our kids. They keep the city growing. They keep the city investing in the future, and we're going to continue to do that. Thank you very much, everyone.